Dan O'Donnell, host of the Dan O'Donnell Show, News Talk 1130 in Milwaukee. Boy, Dan, for as much talk as there is about the dangers of active shooters and AR-15s, you'd think somebody stopping one would carry every cable news show morning till night.
Well, you'd think it would be mentioned on any cable news show, save for perhaps this one. It is kind of remarkable, especially in the wake of Uvalde and everything that we learned in the last couple of days about the inaction of the dozens of police officers and law enforcement officers who didn't engage a shooter. Yet we have a story about a 22-year-old hero who did, and within just a couple of minutes may have saved countless lives at that mall.
How much of this is political, that the idea of a good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun flies in the face of the guns the problem crowd?
100%.
Yeah.
In fact, that to me is the reason that you haven't been hearing about this thwarted mass shooting that unfortunately did start out. This seemed like a suspect who was going to kill as many people as he possibly could until he was taken down. I say thwarted in the sense that he wasn't able to inflict maximum damage. Just the phrase that you said, Leland, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That comes from Wayne LaPierre of the NRA. I don't think I need to tell you or your viewers that the NRA is a highly politicized organization, and that statement has been widely mocked on the political left since almost the moment it came out of LaPierre's mouth. So anytime a defensive gun use like this makes the news, I do believe there is a bit of a coordinated effort, a concerted effort to bury that story so as to not advance that narrative that, yes, there are things that guns can be used for other than just mindless killing.
Yeah, the Brady Project called him a vigilante in their tweet. So take that from what you will. What are the politics of this for President Biden? You think about how the administration, Vice President Harris showed up to Highland Park for the shooting there. The president showed up to Uvalde. They made such a big deal about the shooting in Buffalo. You can imagine that if there had been an innocent bystander who had taken out any one of those shooters, I'm wondering if the president or vice president would be treating it the same way they're treating this in Indianapolis.
Well, we've actually got some history here in my neck of the woods. You might remember long about Thanksgiving weekend, Waukesha, Wisconsin, the parade massacre, in which a man who was out on shockingly low bail got into his SUV and mowed down a whole bunch of people marching in that parade, killing 6, injuring more than 50 other people. Neither the president nor the vice president ever visited because it flew in the face of the very narrative that they were advancing. You might remember when Kamala Harris was running for vice president, she got in a little bit of trouble for promoting a bail fund that was letting Black Lives Matter rioters out of jail when they were protesting and rioting in the wake of George Floyd's death. Well, here you had someone in Waukesha who was out on bail who killed people. This flies in the face of this idea that all guns are bad, that we need to have an all-out assault on the Second Amendment, that there is no possibility that a good guy with a gun could ever thwart a mass shooting. And look, this comes as the Biden administration is saying that that bill that was signed into law just a couple of weeks ago is only a start. So this goes against the gun-grabbing anti-Second Amendment narrative, and there's a good reason why it's largely being ignored by both the White House and much of the press.
Now, you kind of wonder whether, actually don't wonder, you know the answer, whether or not Dicken would be brought to the White House and given the Heroes Award in time that he deserves. Put that aside for a second. What do you make of what Kelly was saying, that this mall is supposed to be a gun-free zone? Obviously, it was not for the shooter, yet there seems to be so much made of the fact that Dicken had a gun in this gun-free zone rather than the probably initial response would be, why was it a gun-free zone to begin with? It didn't seem to do much good.
Well, exactly. I mean, the sad reality is that the overwhelming majority of mass shootings take place in areas where guns are banned. These are soft targets. There's a reason that you don't have a lot of mass shootings at gun ranges. You don't have a lot of mass shootings at gun stores because there is an armed citizenry. But you're right. Not only that, Leland, that there is so much being made out of the fact that this was a gun-free zone and that Dicken was carrying in a gun-free zone, but also the fact that Indiana just had a law go into effect where you don't need to have a license to concealed carry, and that this is somehow proof that there's a vigilante culture just within the first, 18 days of this law going into effect. This, again, is an attempt to politicize, I think, and reclaim the narrative from the good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun, that this good guy was actually a bad guy because he was breaking the rules. Well, clearly, the hero who stopped the gunman had no intention of killing anyone that day, as the gunman did. So I think we have to rethink this idea of advertising to every would-be psychopath that they're not going to encounter any resistance until the police show up if they start shooting up a mall or a school or a church.
Now, you make an interesting point in terms of advertising where there are and are not guns. I used to live in the Middle East. The Israelis used to always talk about screening people, not objects. Conversation for another time. Dan, thank you very much. Dan's heard in Milwaukee and then around the world on the internet. It's good to see you, my friend. Thank you.
You too.
All right.